Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And as we draw to the end of a week when the wheels have fallen off the Brexit wagon again, I'd like to discuss the reasons and realities surrounding the pause in trade negotiations with Canada, the latest case of Brexit hitting reality and getting a headache. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So there was a bit of a blizzard of major Brexit stories last week, and in between the Tory psychodramas, still working through them. But the collapse of trade talks with Canada is a particularly interesting one because it goes right to the heart of the main reason for particularly leaving the customs union. Leaving the single market was largely argued on the basis of getting voters to believe freedom of movement was linked to the forms of immigration that Brexiteers complained about. In reality, of course, it wasn't, as has been shown since. But the customs union, why would people object to the customs union when it just makes trade easier and cheaper with our major market without it having anything whatsoever to do with immigration? Trade deals. Inside a customs union, really tricky to embark on the wonderful trade deals that Brexiteers promised us. The fact that these trade deals have now all turned out to be, at best, as good as the ones we had with the EU, and in many cases now significantly worse, seems to be neither here nor there. And in fact, after this week, some Brexiteers are trying to argue that Brexit was never about trade deals. And every time Brexiteers say, oh no, it wasn't about this thing at all, it's because they know they've lost that argument. But it was. We can find out it was. We've still got their literature. And then do you think to yourself, but in that case, okay, so then presumably you've got no objection to rejoin the customs union then? In reality, there are objections, but never mind that for now. We're not in a position to rejoin the EU as a whole or single market individually. We could negotiate a customs union with the EU in a much more reasonable timescale. Unfortunately, the media never asked the Brexiteers why we shouldn't now, so I can't pass on their response to that, but there are responses which I'll cover in another video next week. But what happened this week to shine a spotlight on it all? Well, first, Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch broached the subject of why we don't have a US trade deal as promised. It was promised, we're going to have a US trade deal. Oh, it's all America's fault, she said. Biden doesn't want one, you know, so I can't deliver it. So I guess we didn't hold all the cards then after all. Then later on, talks with Canada were paused. We're refusing to accept hormone-injected beef. Good. Which Canada wants to export to us, and they're wanting to apply eye-watering tariffs to our cheese exports to them. Oh, we're not so keen on that. The talks were seemingly going nowhere, so now they've been stopped for a while. This is not uncommon. This happens with trade talks. David Hennig has suggested that Canada have been pursuing a very tough line in the negotiations, something that might be partly explained by the fact that we caved completely to Australia, thus letting everyone else know that we were desperate. Interestingly, I've made the same points myself at the time without being anything close to a trade expert. It's almost like it was obvious. If you completely cave into the demands of a country with an economy the size of Australia, which is not tiny, but it's not G7 level, then obviously countries with an even greater economy are going to set a high bar for agreement themselves. In fact, before we even left the EU, I used to regularly point out two realities that were always going to bite us on the arse when it came to trade deals. First, so the way trade talks work is each side wants to gain enhanced access to the other's market without opening up their own market too much. They know they're going to have to do it a bit, but you know, they don't want to over-egg it. Well, a larger market can open up its own market a tiny little bit in a way that's worth a lot to that smaller market. So a larger market has an upper hand in trade talks because they don't have to concede as much to get agreement. But by leaving the EU, we became a much smaller market for trade talks, meaning that we would always have to give up more protections for our own businesses than we did in the EU to strike a deal. Second, absolutely everyone negotiating us would know that we were desperate to do a deal in order to sell the benefits of Brexit to an expectant public. What Boris Johnson was never going to get away with was, right, we can embark on all these new great trade deals now. And people go, so when can we expect to see them, Prime Minister? Oh, in about 10 years' time. No, that couldn't happen. And so it turned out to be. Never mind Australia, New Zealand walked away with a trade deal very much in their favour. We were basically getting the sort of deals which tiny markets would have to accept. Not one of the largest in the world. But the reality of Brexit threw a third factor in as well. Once you actually concede unwisely generous terms to one country, all the other countries want the same. What Hennig's pointing out is, because Johnson and Truss caved into Australia on so much just to get their positive headlines, it gave the green light for everyone else to demand more. Had we approached each trade deal on its own merits, had we observed sensible red lines and stuck by them as fiercely as the Brexiteers stood by their EU red lines, then we could have been in a much stronger position. And this was all caused because trade experts would say that trade negotiations can take up to a decade to conclude with major markets, and Johnson had to prove them wrong by completing them in a matter of months. But of course, anyone can conclude a trade talk in a matter of months if you give the other side everything they ask for. The years of talks are supposed to be each side moving very slowly towards each other until they get agreement, to make sure that you don't give away more than you need to get the best deal for yourself, but to show also that you're a tough cookie for the next market you negotiate with. What we did was basically tell Canada and everyone else, but Canada as a G7 country, we were willing to be bent over and spanked by New Zealand. So of course we would give our North American cousins whatever they asked for. Only things have changed a bit. Back when Johnson was in charge, there is no doubt in my mind Canada would have secured the terms it wanted. But the bitter taste of our first trade deals is having an effect now. Even some Conservative MPs are openly criticising the weakness of these deals. And British farmers are not best pleased either. And, you know, the Tories need agricultural areas. The current Tory leadership does not seem to see as much value in a nice headline in the Daily Express when it comes at such a cost. So now they're finding they can't strike deals at all. Because we always had two choices when it came to Brexit trade deals. Either agree to everything the other side wanted and get a quick one, or stick to our guns and be forced to negotiate them slowly, properly, over many years and not be able to post any positive headlines to the news, because by the time we'd secured that deal, whoever was in charge at the start of the negotiations would be long gone by then. Because these deals take place over much more than the span of a single parliament. Frankly, although this latest episode is embarrassing and should be embarrassing for Brexiteers, it's no bad thing for the country, because mutually beneficial trade deals do take so many years and can easily start under one government and conclude under another. So we can do with the media spotlight not on it, because we don't want it to become party political. They should really be taking place in the background. Too boring to report on, except when we get to the business end of talks, and those talks should never be concluded unless the deal is a net benefit to both our businesses and consumers. And no, a hypothetical 0.05% boost to GDP in 20 years is not a net benefit. Basically, the Brexit experiment has failed on so many levels, and certainly when it comes to trade deals. Now, don't get me wrong. Brexiteers did make an argument which was not utterly ridiculous when it came to negotiations. You know, an awful lot of the things that were promised with Brexit were childishly stupid, were never going to happen. But there were a couple of arguments Brexiteers genuinely had. So with one of them, went like this. Remainers argued that the larger single market would always be able to get better trade deals because of its huge consumer power. Brexiteers argued that the problem with the single market trade deals is there was too much compromise because they had to satisfy over 24 countries. Every single member state got a vote on whether they approved it or not. A single country could sink a trade deal, as has happened. Whereas the UK on its own can be nimbler, arrange quicker deals because you only have to satisfy 2 countries, the UK and whichever one we're negotiating with. This was a reasonable hypothesis in theory, but the facts show that they actually just got it wrong. We haven't managed to use our newfound nimbleness to get better trade deals. We initially gave in to the demands of Japan, Australia, New Zealand, as well as the EU, and have found ourselves with much worse trading terms when voters were promised the same or better. So now we've tried to stick to our guns and are finding ourselves with no deal at all. So now we're in a hole. Brexit is not allowing us to negotiate decent trade deals. Not everyone is accepting that yet, but the reality is that we are not going to negotiate any trade deals with any market around the world that is better than the one we would have had as an EU member. That is being demonstrated ever more clearly with each passing year. The solution isn't easy though, but as I say, I'm likely to discuss that in a standalone video in the near future over the next week, I hope. Until then, this pause in the trade talks with Canada, it should be another wake-up call. Right, consider what's happened over the past 4 years of Brexit. A lot of noise in the media about their, great trade deal, and this great trade deal, and that great trade deal. Oh, look at all these trade deals. So where are the benefits then? Where's the benefit to our trade? Oh, not actually improved trade? Oh dear. What does the official analysis say is going to improve? Because never mind what a minister might tell a newspaper, and the newspaper may tell their readers, where there are no consequences for lying. The official economic impact assessments that the government publish say that we gain nothing of consequence from these trade deals. Yet we know we lost a great deal with our hard Brexit. And the more people see this, the quicker we will be able to take action, because right now we are just hurting ourselves for no even hypothetical benefit. There isn't going to be a benefit in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Doesn't matter how long. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.